Captain, we have them. We've established Transporter Lock, the Star Trek Discovery podcast. Join Ken and Sabriel each week as they explore strange new episodes, seek out new plots and new characters, and boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
Hello and welcome to Transporter Lock number 62 for Saturday, October 24th, 2020. I'm your co-host, Chief Engineer Ken Gagney.
I am Captain Sabriel Maston. It's good to be back. It's weird to have so much Star Trek to talk about again.
I know, it's been only a week since our last show, which is what we usually do, but it's been hit or miss as Star Trek comes in a burst and then goes offline, and then comes in a burst and goes offline. But this week we're here to talk about Discovery, Season 3, Episode 2, Far From Home. And we're very honored to have a guest join us to discuss this episode. Please welcome First Officer Tiffany Bridge. Hello, Tiffany.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
So, Tiffany, I understand that you are the first officer of a transport ship. Is that correct?
Yes. I like to keep it kind of low key.
And are you transporting like space refugees, space drugs? What's going on?
A little of both. I think space refugees primarily. Space refugees, a lot of shuttling people back and forth between star bases,
Tribbles.
So many tribbles.
But they're for personal
problem.
use, so that's okay.
Well, we had the Exterminator out last week, and I don't think they were very thorough about it.
Oh my gosh, that's the trouble with tribbles. They just get exterminated too easily.
I mean, in Klingons, they're going to have like a huge service for this. Like, if you can get Exterminator for roaches here, like there you can get it for tribbles.
Right? Like, once the Klingons joined the Federation, you couldn't just have a tribble infestation on your ship and let it go because they're cute, right? Like, it became like a diplomatic thing.
I mean, long term, the Great Klingon Tribble War was good for the Klingon economy.
That's true.
Okay, I know. Super quick aside, because it's related. There was a reference to one of the Klingons in the original series, or no, in the DS9 episode when they went back in time. And one of them basically made a offhand comment about how he wished he had a statue, or he will have a statue of Kirk's head in one hand and a tribble in the other. And in the Star Trek card game, they actually made this statue. So you could kill Kirk and alter the timeline, and they made the statue as a picture for that card, and I loved it.
Amazing.
But we're here to talk about an episode of Star Trek Discovery.
And before that, we're here to scrutinize our new member, Tiffany. So how long have you been a Trekkie?
So I started watching Trek rerun, like the original series reruns with my dad when I was a kid. So that was, like, I was little. But I would say that, I mean, I enjoyed that a lot. But I would say, how like on, Doctor Who, people talk about how they have like their doctor. Like my Trek is TNG.
Okay.
So that was, because that TNG premiered when I was, I don't know, in third grade or so, and so went through, for 7 years, right? So like up until I was in high school, and so that was like kind of my formative, like prime TV watching years. The ones that came after that, like I was getting into like high school and college and didn't have as much time to watch. So for me, like TNG is kind of like, to me, that's like canonical Trek. Is
that also your favorite Trek?
I would say it's the Trek that is my favorite right now. Where I am right now, because it's 2020. What I really want to watch is shows about like good people doing their best, right? And TNG is like this extremely soothing like workplace drama right now. So I'm really enjoying like a rewatch of it right now.
And I understand you are raising your child to be a Trekkie as well.
I am. We have started with TNG for him as well, because we want to turn on something that we can all watch together, and TNG being suitable for the broadcast standards and practices of the late 80s and early 90s is not too advanced for my 7-year-old. So we've had a good time with that.
Although we got a hint that maybe they're reining in Discovery a bit, because Saru did cut off Tilly this week before she could swear.
Well, I have a friend who works at CBS actually in Trek promotion, and when productions all had to shut down for COVID, one of the things she pointed out was like, at some point we're going to run out of episodes, and then the only thing we're going to be able to put on CBS is like disco and reruns. And so I think they are now starting to think about like disco having like a second life on broadcast television. And so, yeah, Saru cut Tilly off, and I was disappointed because I was ready to hear it, but it's a lot easier if you don't have to edit that stuff out later, right? So I can see them trying to like clean it up a little bit and make it more suitable for broadcast TV.
It's true. When you hear Samuel L. Jackson talking about Monday to Friday planes with monkey fighting snakes, it's just not the same.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
So what have you thought of Discovery so far?
I mean, I am loving this. I think this has been a really great sort of return to the Trek universe. I think, there was a lot of controversy about it when it started, and there was a lot of people like complaining in the first season, like, oh, this isn't Trek. It's not optimistic and humanistic like Trek is. And I'm like, what show are you even watching? Right. I think that in some ways this is the most optimistic Trek. And I think I'm just having a great time, like digging in with this ensemble. I'm really enjoying the diversity of this Trek, and I love now in season 3 how they're like jumping it far forward in the timeline so that it's not like constrained by the existing canon, which I think was a real challenge for it the first 2 seasons, right? Like you can't exist immediately before the Enterprise without everybody wondering, like, where's the Enterprise right now? What are they doing? And then in season 2, they like leaned into that, and then like they just gave you the Enterprise, and so, which was fun, but Discovery deserves to be its own thing. And I think now that it's like 1,000 years in the future, and there's not really even, as we've discovered, like a federation to speak of anymore, I think they'll really get to kind of spread their wings and expand a bit.
That's one thing people have always said about Trek, is that it's about going forward. I remember that complaint being made when Enterprise first aired, which is, why are we going backward? That's not what Star Trek is about. Well, Discovery is really taking that to the extreme. I'm curious, though, what you meant about Discovery being the most optimistic of the Treks.
So, when we see, like, for example, in TNG, and TNG is always the example that I go back to, right? Like, you have this very, like, kind of settled and established federation, right? And you see, like, a lot of bureaucracy in the federation, and you start to see it as kind of like there's like a political power structure in it, and then you jump back to Discovery, and you have a younger federation, a scrappier federation, a federation that's still at war with the Klingons, and trying to figure out how to live its values while in the middle of this existential threat. So there's that, and then you have, Michael Burnham, who makes a terrible choice in the first episode, right, and pays the price for it, and then has to spend basically the rest of the season trying to forgive herself for that and make it up to herself that was the choice that she's made. And now here they are, kind of jumped forward 1,000 years in the future, and there's no federation, and they have to figure out like what do those values mean? And I think I just feel like I don't recall any Trek character who articulates at an emotional level like what the Federation means the way that Michael Burnham does. Right? Like, not even Picard. Like, Picard was a true believer, but Burnham just really seems like she just craves and needs the Federation to be what she believes it to be, and for people to be what they're capable of. And I think that so I think that I feel that the most intensely from this track versus any of the others.
In some ways, it was very easy for Picard to be a true believer, whereas Burnham is more challenged by it and yet still is a believer.
Right. And I think something that I think that was very interesting, not to diverge too much, but in that season of Picard that we got, I really enjoyed the way they sort of challenged Picard on that. That it was, it was very easy for you to be to hold to these Federation values while you got to go back up onto your fully automated luxury space communism starship and fly away, right? You were very comfortable. But then in that season, they really confronted him with all of the people who did not get to enjoy the protection of the Federation the way he did, and really challenge his values that way. And I loved the deconstruction, and I loved watching this beloved character have to confront those truths. And I think, we got a little bit of that in this week's episode of Discovery as well. Like, what do you do when you have these Federation values, but you're confronted with the scarcity and desperation and deprivation that the Federation had eliminated?
Bree, do you have any questions for our guests?
No, I just taking all that in. That was incredible.
Yeah. Well, on that note, why don't we talk about not just the scarcity of this episode, but the episode in general? Tiffany, you gave us some. Well, actually, we always offer a TLDR. Has anybody prepared one, or shall I wing it?
I did not.
Okay.
Oh, I think you should go.
The TLDR is just like how Michael Burnham crash lands on a planet after coming out of the wormhole last week. So does the Discovery. It's a different planet, and they are in need of repair. So Tilly and Saru walk over to a space saloon to get the materials that they need, and some bad guy comes in, shoots the place up because he is basically exploiting them for whatever few resources they have because they're stranded there because they can't leave the planet. But then Georgiou comes in, saves the day. They get the parts they need. They go back to the ship. They start to save it. And then Michael Burnham shows up and saves them and says that she's been waiting for them for a year. The end.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
You can tell that a year has passed because she has box braids now.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I meant to Google going into this podcast episode, and which I forgot, was the rate at which human hair grows, because that seems like a lot more than a year's worth of growth.
I think it was. I think she's definitely, there's definitely been some enhancement there, because I can tell you that I have not cut my hair now in over a year, and I did not grow that much hair in that time.
Same.
So,
Okay.
I mean, it's the future. They can build things out of mold. What was it? Moldable or matter?
Programmable matter.
programmable
Yeah,
matter.
yeah. You can probably
Programmable hair.
do hair
Why
growth.
not?
They
Yeah.
probably have really excellent hair growth vitamins as well.
Yeah.
She's not only the president, she's also a client. But let's not get too tied up in the minutia. We will come back to the end of the episode. Tiffany, you gave us some thoughts overall about how Starfleet interacts with the scarcity of this episode. What did you think of the episode in general?
I mean, I loved it. I loved the way that they really leaned into kind of the Western tropes. That thing where they kind of push through the saloon doors and everybody kind of reaches for the weapon, and just all of those tropes were very familiar, and it was really fun to see them in this setting, because I think we kind of forget sometimes that the original pitch for the original Star Trek was Wagon Train to the Stars, so it was nice to see that little shout out back to the origins of Trek. I loved it, and I loved on the topic of Federation values. I loved this thing where Saru is standing there trying to talk his way out of this situation with people who are not there to talk, and then you see a figure come tumbling through the door having been captured, and you realize it's Georgiou, and I literally shouted in my house, "Oh no, you messed up now!" Because once Georgiou shows up, she's just gonna lay waste.
Right.
To the bad guys, and she did, which was extremely satisfying. But then also the relationship between Saru and Georgiou, I just can't wait to see more of that, because he loathes her, and rightly so, right? The feeling is mutual, and I just can't wait to watch them just continue to sneer at each other for the entire season.
But think about how confusing that must be for Saru, because our universe's Georgiou is somebody he absolutely admired and idolized, and to see her face every day and know that this is somebody he has to now stand up to and keep an eye on must be, on some level, very confusing.
Right, and this is someone who literally ate members of his species.
Oh, that's right.
Uh-huh.
Considers him a delicacy, would still eat him if given half the chance.
I forgot. Ugh.
Yeah.
I was thinking while watching this, or even last week, Discovery has gone from one situation to the next situation to the next situation, all in rapid fire succession. They have not had any time, virtually no time, to just chill, like they did between getting their medals in the first season to going to find Enterprise, and that's about it.
Yeah.
That's true, because this is a serial show. Every episode picks up where the last one left off, and that continues from season to season. I don't know if many other serial TV shows do that. I don't watch that many, but you're right. It's just relentless.
Yeah, I think that's partially kind of where TV is right now. I watch a fair number of serial shows, and I think that is kind of a pretty normal thing. But But yeah, I do note that there's never like on TNG, there's always like, oh, well, this week we're doing a survey of this uninhabited planet. And then they like encounter whatever like the alien of the week is. But there's never just like, oh, we're just going to go over here and explore this part of the sector, like this galaxy over here and like do some science. Like they're a science vessel. They never get to do any science.
Well, that's one of the things that the novels create the opportunity for, is with every episode of TNG taking place at some indeterminate time after the previous episode, anything can happen in the middle, and that's where the novels come in. Whereas Discovery novels, I've read a couple, and I'm trying to figure out, when did they find time for this?
Right. It's AU fanfic.
I did
Pretty much.
I did like the Western tropes, but I thought the one aspect that was a little unbelievable was the spurs. Why do they need spurs in the future? Because I didn't see any mounts.
Oh,
Yeah, I too questioned that.
well, we don't know their lives. We only saw a very small piecemeal. Who knows how much they walk or have mounts somewhere on their ship? Maybe even like a Firefly.
It's true, but like we did see the ship pull into dock, so maybe like in the latest Star Wars movie, they keep mounts so that if they need to do a land assault on a starship, they can do that. But
or they're in fashion right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say it could just be like an affectation. They want you to hear them coming.
Oh yeah, no, it's a very good way just to hear. A lot of people hear you're coming is hearing that little metal.
okay,
And you're like, oh crap, it's Zara.
I find that believable. There was a point in college where I had a broken leg and I was walking with a cane, and then a few months later I saw somebody else walking with a cane. I said, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And he said, "Oh, I just think it looks cool." And I'm like, "No, I was not using a cane because it was cool. I was using a cane because I had to, and if I didn't have to, I wouldn't. And here you are misappropriating it. Stop that." But yeah, the fact is, some people do these things because they look cool, and if spurs fall in that category, then fine.
Yeah, I remember noting that. Like, what does this guy need spurs for? But maybe it's for like maximum utility, like when kicking someone when they're down. I don't know. I mean,
you can't be a space cowboy without spurs.
Or maybe it's for other purposes, which brings up a question we all had, which was Georgiou and Linus. Like, she was flirting with him, especially about his visible spectrum, and then we don't see him again. And we have some theories about what that was all about. Bree, what was yours?
Oh, no, she was just flirting with him to dump him on her workload. That's it.
So she was just saying, "Hey, I've been assigned to do this. Why don't you do it for me instead?"
Yeah, just in her own way.
Yeah.
She wanted to get out of the ship.
Assumption.
What was the thing about the visible spectrum, though?
Just flirting.
Huh.
Well, or it'll come back later, but when that crew member suddenly like has to step in and save the day in a very specific way, right? Because like I feel like I've stopped assuming that there are any throwaway lines in anything. So and related to that, like we're talking about like a society that is completely depleted of dilithium, right? Well, meanwhile, Tilly has a relationship with the queen of that planet where they invented like dilithium recrystallization. Like, is that going to come up this season at all?
Oh, interesting. I like your theory about the line about Linus being relevant later. It's sort of like Chekhov's visible spectrum. If it's mentioned in the first act, it must be used in the third act.
Visible spectrum, right? Like he'll show up in like 3 episodes, and there will be some critical problem that could only be solved by Geordi's visor or this guy's visible spectrum.
Well, that didn't work out in Lower Decks. They're like, "We need somebody who can exist in the vacuum of space. Peanut Hamper, you'll do it." And she's like, "Nope, I'm out of here." Also, I think we neglected to mention, this is going back a couple episodes of Transporter Lock now, what a great name Peanut Hamper is. Let's just acknowledge that and move on. Okay, thank you. Linus was not the only secondary crew member we got to see this month. I saw in our notes that we got to learn a little bit more about other members of the crew as well.
Georgiou. I love Georgiou. Just her little comments here. It's like she just loves hopping from universe to universe. She was talking to Commander Non, and or she made a comment to her like, "You could have stayed where you were, in your time, basically in your timeline." And but she's like, nah, for me, I like going from universe to universe. And she has basically no time span and travel at all. And she's just popping here and there, and she just loves the chaos of it. And she mentions if she would have stuck behind, she would have been made lead of Section 31, and bureaucracy is where fun goes to die.
I'm trying to figure out what that statement means for the Section 31 spin-off show she's supposed to be in.
She does not want to be a leader, so she's probably just going to be on away missions always. However, that show is supposed to pan out. If it's ever going to pan out, we still have no new information as of this recording.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
But she does clearly care for Michael. I mean, even though she says it was a crappy decision of Nan to stay aboard the Discovery when she could have stayed on the Enterprise, as Nan points out, you're here too. And Georgiou is very eager to get the communications array up and running so that they can find Burnham. So even though she is Section 31 and the evil empress of another universe, we continue to see evidence that whatever universe Burnham exists in, Georgiou really cares for her.
Yeah. I noticed that as well. And I think it's such an interesting like shade to the Georgiou character, who is, in my opinion, like nature's perfect predator, right? Like she just figures out how to make it work for her no matter where she is. She's extremely adaptable, but like Burnham is always going to be this like tether for her. And I thought that was really, I think that's very interesting. And I'll be interested to see how that works out. For her later, because I feel like that's going to be another one of those things that comes back at a key moment.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be more to her character for this season than just want to get Michael back, because we got Michael back already. Like, oh, her story's done.
Right.
Right.
There's going to be more. In the saloon, I also loved when the standoff what she's having with Saru. He's like, put down your weapon. And she's like, I like my weapon. I just got a kick out of that.
She took a big chance allowing herself to get shot by that bad guy, because as we saw what he did to Cal, that weapon with sustained burst is fatal, and Georgiou was able to sustain multiple minor hits, but there was no reason why the bad guy didn't just gun her down like he did Cal.
No, there wasn't. But apparently something in her just knows how being evil works. She's like, nah, this guy's not going to do. He's going to make an example of me.
And for her, it's foreplay.
Yeah, I felt like this was like a predator meeting a bigger predator. And suddenly becoming, like, realizing that he's become the prey and, like, just doing that recalculation. I think we did learn that in the first season, right? That Georgiou's, shall we call it, pain tolerance is not so much a tolerance as it is, like you said, foreplay. Like, she... Like, I think that's, I mean, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, you probably have similar devices, like, for fun.
Oh.
Like, that you just keep around for fun.
Like the Tantalus booth.
Yeah. So, but I think that was kind of like he was, I think Zara was so, like, shocked that she was not, agonized by it, that she withstood the blast, that I think he just wasn't really prepared to, like, pull out a projectile weapon and shoot her.
Speaking of Zara, he's coming back. I recognize him as a very evil person from the show Vikings. So he knows how to play bad guys. Besides the fact that it didn't kill him, he's coming back.
But even he said that he wouldn't last a night out on that planet with the parasitic ice. So how is he going to get out of that?
That's TV villains for you. You don't see him die, so that means they're coming back.
If you don't see them die, they're not dead.
So maybe he's like this season's Harry Mudd, just keeps popping up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Also in the saloon was Saru and Tilly. You know, they walked there together. And when he first said, Tilly, you're coming with me, Georgiou said, her? And then even Nan said, her? And Nan was like, I'm sorry. But even though I didn't say it, I was thinking it too. I was like, of the three people you have here, Nan is the one best equipped to handle unknown situations and is the one that you trust. She's the only one at that intersection. And yet you chose Tilly. And I am really glad that even she had the question. On their walk, she said, why me, sir? And Saru said, because you make a wonderful first impression. I was like, oh, that's true. This isn't just an unknown situation. This is also first contact. And that's something that Saru was taking into account. He really is a good captain.
Yes. And also, who else would go toe-to-toe with Georgiou if it wasn't Nan?
What do you mean?
No one.
What do you mean?
No, I mean, Nan was in charge when Saru was gone.
Right.
If Nan was gone and Saru was gone, who's next in line and who's going to actually go toe to toe with JoJo, who thinks she's in charge.
That's a good point. I don't know who would be next in line after that, but I love that Nan is here because I completely forgot about her except for the episode where Arium died. That's the only like concrete memory I have of her. I know she showed up elsewhere, but I didn't expect to see her in the 31st century, and yet here she is, and it's great to have her back.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we get more, more of the crew this season. Like they've started to give us some of that. Now that they've kind of established the leads and everything. But I really love getting to know the other members of the crew. Like I'm here for anything about like Kayla Detmer. So just bring me all of the stories of like the less central crew members.
Yeah, Detmer's always been one of my favorite characters, and I'm really concerned about her. Like I'm genuinely worried. Like what is going on with her this episode? She's not well.
She's one of my favorites too. I mean, we both have side shaves, so there's that. But honestly, I think they didn't handle her injury well here. I am not invested yet. Like, I worry about the character, but they did not seem interested in giving clues or breadcrumbs, or at least ones that were interesting enough to pick up on to what's going on. The only thing I had maybe is when she's walking away from sickbay, they show her walking into a dark corridor. Like one person walks by her, but she's just the way she's walking in that scene, the way it was filmed, she just basically looks like she's walking alone. That's the only thing I have, maybe. Otherwise, like, it just didn't give me enough to be invested yet.
Yeah, I can't tell if it's a physical injury because she went to sickbay and she got a clean bill of health. And I don't know if it's PTSD because if so, it seemed to come on pretty fast when they crash landed on the planet. Maybe that's an experience she's gone through before. Maybe she was responsible for a bad landing previously and she's thinking about the people that she lost. I have no idea.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that I think we'll see later, because there was so much happening in this episode that I feel like anything that they took time to show you at all is there for a reason, because like this was a pretty packed episode. And there were a lot of things that kind of had to get short shrift. So I feel like the fact that they took the time to show us Detmer being not right, like that's going to come back.
Yeah.
Like my thought was, being in Derby, I thought concussion, but it would be when she got signed off medically, and I mean, they've just shown like, oh, you have a concussion very easily. So I think it's something more than that, just based on Star Trek history.
Yeah,
but,
I agree. It seems to go beyond the physical. As maybe, have we seen that the Discovery has any sort of a ship's counselor?
No, we didn't add them to we got space hotels in TNG.
Yeah, so I don't know that she has anybody to talk to.
Wait. The Admiral Cornwell in Discovery, she was psychologist.
Right, but
psychiatry. Right. That's what the
no, I acknowledge that psychology and psychiatry exist in Starfleet. But she was an admiral, and we haven't seen any such permanent fixture on the Discovery manifest.
Well, I mean, I think there's some theories floating around that, with the intersection of Leland having been on Discovery, and they're like still cleaning up his remains, right? Super gross. And Detmer being not quite right. There's some theory that maybe Control has infected Detmer, and maybe they have not actually escaped Control after all.
I read that as well. Like, why would they bring Leland's body into the future when the goal of going to the future was to get away from him? And they even mentioned to Georgiou, you have some Leland on your shoes. But if they were to do again this season to Detmer what they did last season to Arium, I would be very disappointed.
That would be disappointing.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that, but there was two things that they really hammered down in this episode. And that was one, Jet's back hurts. Like they kept bringing that up over and over and over again. And two, Leyland guts all over. Yeah. Even in the recap, they made sure to show him dying. And then here are his guts, just like in Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yeah, one of the reasons I tend to avoid the opening recap is because they only show you the parts that are going to be relevant to this episode, and in that sense, they're a bit of a spoiler. So I can see why they wanted to give context to comments like you have some Leland on your shoes, or why that guy whose name I've already forgotten was scraping him up out of the mycelium chamber. But did they really need to show that in the recap just for those two relatively minor points, or to Sabriel's point, is it more important than that? I don't know.
It's hard to say because, I mean, this is, in some ways, this is really like a 2-part season premiere, right? Because last week we got an episode that was just Burnham. And this week is the episode that's almost exclusively Discovery. So in some ways, we're still kind of reminding everybody what happened last season if you haven't rewatched it recently.
That's true.
So I think there's a little bit of that as well. Like, you have to remember, like, exactly how did they get into this situation?
That's true. I mean, and to a degree, you could almost watch the first 2 episodes in either order, and you end up in the same place.
Right.
I saw some people online suggesting watching them backwards on your first viewing. Obviously, we can't do that. But might make things interesting or different, but still end up the same way.
Yeah, I mean, you want to go and the episodes are shown in chronological order, but I suspect we're going to nonetheless continue to have some degree of flashback as we see what Burnham has been up to over the last year.
Oh, plus we don't have part 2 of part 1. The Hope That You Bring, part 1.
I was looking at the list of episodes for this season, and I don't see a part 2.
Yeah, I didn't think that was a part 1.
It was in the title.
No, I agree it was in the title, but
No. Yeah.
but I don't see an episode named part 2.
So what are they playing at?
I don't know.
I mean, it has more meaning to it. Maybe it's breaking the counter like we're used to part 1, part 2. So it must have some other meaning.
I don't know. Or maybe, I mean, one review I read online referred to the unwritten part 2. So maybe there will be a part 2 at some point. I don't know. I don't think they're just going to put part 1 in there and leave it like that, though. So let's talk about, actually, Burnham. And since we're on that topic, I was not at all surprised that the ship that showed up was hers, but I was surprised it had been only a year, because as they said last week, Discovery could show up tomorrow or 1,000 years from now. And that's a pretty wide range. And I for some reason, thought that Burnham might be waiting 5 years for Discovery to show up. 1 year really isn't all that long. I mean, it's long when you don't know when Discovery is going to show up. But if Burnham had been told, for example, not that she was, oh, Discovery will be here a year from now, you just have to wait, I'd be like, I can wait a year. That's not bad.
Well, I think it's long enough to let Burnham kind of establish like a base in this timeline, right? Like, she clearly was able to show up in a ship to rescue them. So she didn't get thrown over by Book that we know of, right? And so she's been there long enough that she has like familiarity with the world, so that they're not all stumbling around like kind of blind into these kind of confrontations like they would otherwise have been, which is good because like 2 episodes of that was enough. And in a what is it, a 10 or 13 episode season, we don't really need more than 2 episodes of that. So she's been there long enough that she kind of gets the gist and is familiar with it and can kind of act as Discovery's guide through the what are we up now, like the 33rd century or whatever it is. But she's not so entrenched and so familiar with it that she has been able to like reconstitute the Federation purely through the force of her will, right? Like, she's not that entrenched. So I think like a year is probably about the right amount of time.
I agree that it's helpful for Discovery to have somebody aboard who knows what they're doing and where, and what's more important, when they are. And that person being Burnham makes a lot of sense, because if they had to bring aboard somebody unknown to them like Book solely to serve as a guide, I would be suspicious, and I would wait for that person to lead them into a trap, which is exactly what Book did to Burnham last week. So we got that out of the way, at least.
Right. And, this way they all get to meet Grudge. So
Grudge Cat. Woo!
Yeah, exactly. Who is a queen.
So big she could feed a planet. Let me see. What else are we talking about this week? So Burnham discovered last week that there is no Federation as we know it. It still exists in some minor pocket capacity. And this week we heard Zaret talk about the Vidrash, which is how the Federation was referred to in the Short Trek episode Calypso. So this is the very first time we've heard that phrase, Vidrash, in Discovery, as opposed to Short Treks, which means we are in or leading to the timeline of Calypso. This is one of the most concrete connections we have had yet between that episode and Discovery.
Excellent. I've been waiting for that. No, seriously, I loved that short so much, and I was desperately confused about what was happening, but in that please just don't explain it to me too fast kind of way. So I'm ready. My body is ready. Please please bring me the connection to that short trek.
They were really playing the long game when they made that short trek, because that came out a couple of years ago now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as Zara mentions, the pigeon, that's just basically pigeon version of Federation. Now, we could get that confirmed. We kind of suspected that. Now we get it confirmed. And it means that lingo starts staying around for a long time.
Did we see that language in Calypso?
Pigeon is just a real thing. How to describe it? It's a group of syllables and consonants to trying to make a common that people of different cultures, who speak different cultures, could try to speak to each other, at least get some basic semblance. It's a real thing. It's just another way to say Suru calls common tongue English basically for us, or whoever, whatever they're broadcasting this episode in. But pigeon is just another short form of a common. I don't know how to describe it. It's a real term used in language.
No, I get that. It's an adjective. Yeah. It refers to a pidgin language. But so there is no canonical pidgin. It can be one of many different things, like a pidgin English, for example.
Yeah.
So I didn't recognize the pidgin that was used in this episode. Was it based on English?
Oh, that I don't have knowledge on. Sorry.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I didn't recognize it. And it all went by so quickly.
But we do know in Calypso that the main character seemed to be fighting that era's form of the Federation, as if the Federation were the bad guys. And that does not yet seem to be the case in the era that Discovery has found itself in.
Yeah, there are some. And maybe we'll never get answers to that. So far in the future, even further yet. But you're right. And it leads up to possibility, but it's just so far flung in the future, it's hard to really judge where that's going or coming from.
Mm-hmm. I suspect it'll tie in eventually. And again, they're playing the long game, so it might be another season or two. As we just mentioned on last week's Transporter Lock, they have been confirmed for season 4 of Discovery. So maybe they are oh, you know what? We have time to play out this plot. Let's not rush it.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Kind of hey, if they can go from episode 1, season 1 of Star Trek Next Generation to the series finale and have it be the same plot of humanity being on trial, why not take a little bit longer than that to play out a Discovery plot? I'm here for it. Let's see.
Well, and they've kind of dangled this also sort of tantalizing bit in the first episode, in last week's episode, about there are other Federation ships out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not very many, but there are a few.
I'm really looking forward to finding out what Burnham has been up to for the last year, who she has met, what connections she's made, and what impact it's had on the Federation. Because if I know her, she's not going to let the current state of the Federation stand. She is going to do everything she can to bring it back and to realize that vision of the Federation that extends beyond just having dilithium.
Right. Yeah.
There's one other big part of this episode I want to talk about, but before we move on, is there anything else we want to say about Burnham or Calypso before I go back?
Not for me.
Okay. Because we cannot talk about this episode without acknowledging the wonderful, wonderful dialogue between Paul Stamets and Jet Reno.
Oh my god. Just give me I want outtakes, I want short treks of them just bickering. They're my favorite odd couple.
The gays, just bickering with each other. I love it.
Yeah, I just just give me Jet Reno and Stamets just having to work in the same lab and just be at each other's throats all the time. Give that to me.
It's so interesting because in the first season, Paul Stamets was the obnoxious, brash character, and nobody liked it or knew how to put up with it except maybe for Culbert. And then we bring in Reno, and she's just like, does not give a crap. Nothing, like water off a duck's back. Anything Stamets says just rolls right off her, and she dishes it right back. And Stamets is so unaccustomed to that, he has no idea what to do with it.
It's amazing.
She's the McCoy of the show, and I love it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. If we
like inject it directly into my veins.
if we hadn't had that first season of Stamets being hard as nails, then we wouldn't be so amused at him being so flat-footed or caught wrong-footed in this season. And I love that juxtaposition, that transition.
Yeah, like he was so totally intimidating because he was the expert on this, like this amazing technology that the spore drive, right? And he, understood how it worked and was like, is this brilliant engineer, and like Tilly was terrified of him. And then like watching Jet Reno just completely, like, she's so unimpressed.
Mhm.
Like I just like I love it. Like it's so great. And I mean, and I love the Stamets character. Like I think like I always have a good time when he's on screen, but like part of it is just watching him get taken down, like the many pegs that he needs to be taken down. Yeah, I'm so here for it.
And one of the reasons for that is because we've seen so many opportunities for him to be vulnerable just in the last season. Like in season 1, his partner is murdered. In season 2, he's impaled with a 7-inch piece of shrapnel. And in season 3, now he's dealing with the physical recovery as well as having his partner back. I loved that just one small moment he had with Culber where he says, "It's good to have you back." And he's not talking about the fact that Culber was dead. He's talking about the fact that Culber wanted to leave Stamets entirely. And it took him a while to come around and realize just what it was he was going to give up.
Yeah, I think that relationship over season 2 really played out beautifully. And like you said, it did give Stamets some really great moments of vulnerability and really kind of humanized him after season 1, which is important, right? Like if he were still season 1 Stamets, he'd be very boring.
Yes.
Absolutely. And Anthony Rapp does the sad puppy face really well.
I was very impressed that he was able to repair the Discovery, because not just that he was able to pull through the pain and get that part replaced, but also that Discovery crash landed. We don't see that happen very often, and when it does happen, the ships don't always get back up. But apparently they were able to effect the the bare minimum of repairs to get that ship flying again. And that was not something I expected. I kind of thought they might be stranded there, in which case it really wouldn't be a good name for a show, Discovery, if Discovery is destroyed in the second episode.
Yeah, the ship has plot armor.
Yep. That's why it doesn't take any damage when it hits the ground.
I've never heard that phrase before. That's amazing.
Oh, really?
You've never heard the phrase plot armor before? Yeah, like
it's very big in D&D.
I love it.
Yeah, it can't die because you can't go on without it. Though it would be interesting to see as they get farther into the season, right? Because Discovery is an antique, and not just like a little bit, right? Like Discovery is 1,000 years out of date, and so it would be interesting to see what would happen. Do they continue on with this Discovery and maybe just sort of piecemeal upgrade it as they go? Or do they end up having to scuttle this Discovery and like find some 33rd century ship that they christen the Discovery? Like, is this Discovery going to continue to be our Discovery, or is there going to be like the Discovery B?
Well, it's kind of like just because a new iPhone came out doesn't mean you need to upgrade if the current iPhone is serving your purposes. The only reason they would need to scuttle this ship and get a new one is if they needed to be competitive with the other ships they are encountering.
Right.
Like the original Enterprise NX-01 didn't even have shields. They polarized the hull. And so if you were to take that Enterprise and drop them into, say, TNG era, the Klingons and Romulans would make short work of them. So in that case, yeah, they would need to upgrade.
So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, especially because Discovery flies. That doesn't mean Discovery is repaired.
True.
Right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens, like with the physical ship.
And as an Apple II user in the year 2020, I can tell you that finding parts for old computers is not easy. Although now that they have programmable matter, who knows?
it's not just like it's not just 1 or 2 generations behind, right? Like it's an entire 1,000 years behind. Like, can you imagine trying to repair 1,000-year-old technology right now? Like that's the level of difference we're talking about.
I mean, what would be 1,000-year-old technology? What were they using in the year 1020?
I was like, actually, technology from 1020 may not be that difficult to.
Right, like, oh no, my bow and arrow is broken. I think we can fix that. Here's a crossbow.
I didn't think it possible, but never mentioned that maybe a new ship. Like, that would give a reason to have Calypso happen if they had to get off Discovery for a reason and go pick it up later.
Although we know that the sphere data cannot be extracted from Discovery, so I don't think they can scuttle the ship. Not only will it not allow itself to be scuttled, but they can't risk that data falling into the wrong hands.
Well, so this was my question as we were watching the recap. I was like, why didn't they just like destroy Discovery?
They tried.
They did. You're right. They did. I forgot. They had tried to destroy Discovery.
They tried the self-destruct and it turned itself off. They launched torpedoes at it. It raised the shields. They couldn't tell the ship, and not that this happened in the episode, to pilot itself into the sun because the ship would reject that order.
So Discovery now has a sense of self-preservation.
Or it will.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's sentient, but it is making decisions that will not allow itself to be destroyed.
And that might lead to Calypso.
Right.
Like, I mean, I think I even mentioned it back then. Like, for whatever reason, maybe they have to park it here for a while and then come back and get it in the future.
Yeah, because I believe the Discovery was told to wait there until the crew returned. And we don't know how long they've been waiting or where the crew went. But there is some sense that it had a crew and it will have a crew. But in this period, it does not. I mean, I think one of the theories we floated in a previous episode of Transporter Lock was that, kind of like Robo in the video game Chrono Trigger, they send the ship back 1,000 years so that as far as the humans are perceiving time, they are without their ship for like a minute. But then the ship itself has had 1,000 years of evolution because they're like, we need this AI today, and it's going to take 1,000 years to evolve it. So let's have that 1,000 years be in the past instead of the future, so that we're ready for it. Could be. Who knows?
Yeah, so interesting.
Are there any other minor aspects of this episode that we want to talk about?
Tilly also had a moment where she was just being herself. We kind of brushed on it, but I loved her de-escalating the situation in the saloon. The crash landing on the planet of Discovery was very reminiscent of Timeless episode of Voyager, where the crash landed onto an icy planet.
Yeah, it seems that both Discovery and Burnham did not come out of that wormhole very well. They both crash landed.
Also, I loved... I could very much commiserate with Discovery getting stuck in the ice and mud in North Dakota. All I could picture was me getting my tires go back and forth and back and forth. Come on.
Although sometimes you have milder winters than Boston, Massachusetts, where I'm from.
Yeah, it happens.
Can we talk for a second go back to a second to parasitic ice?
Yes.
Because that phrase is so terrifying, right? Like, because, you encounter all kinds of, on Trek, you encounter all kinds of interesting wonders, right? Every week, right? And so the writers have to come up with new things all the time, right? And then, but for this, they came up with parasitic ice, and I'm like, is this like a throwaway monster where where we encounter it just on this one planet and then never again, or is this like a thing that's going to come back and haunt our nightmares? And I'm not sure which one I'd rather it be.
It reminded me a lot of Ice 9 from the book Cat's Cradle. Are you familiar with that book?
No.
So in this book, the army says, well, our troops are always getting bogged down in mud. We want a way to solidify the mud so that they can just walk right over it. So the scientist comes up with a particle that, when added to mud, solidifies it. But it does it in a chain reaction. So you touch it to any part of the mud and it spreads out to all the mud. But then it turns out that happens to any liquid. So you drop it in a pool of water and it solidifies the entire pool of water. And spoiler, at the end of the episode, somebody drops it into the ocean.
Oh no!
And so the entire planet's oceans, which are all connected, all freeze. and one person, just purposely does not want to live in this world, so that she touches it to her tongue, and all the liquid in her body freezes.
That's where I thought it was going.
Yeah.
Like as a weapon.
I mean, it's not weaponized in the episode, in the book, but yeah, the end is basically...
Yeah, but give humans something like that for 15 minutes and they'll figure it out.
Right. So when the bad guy in this episode says that he saw parasitic ice enter into somebody's throat, that's specifically what I thought of was Ice 9.
Yeah, it was terrifying. Yeah. Like, how do you make ice a character, like an intimidating character to show? Make it parasitic.
Well,
and give the ice like a will, right?
Well, I Googled parasitic ice, and I excluded the word discovery from my search results. And apparently, the X-Files had a creature called a parasitic ice worm.
Interesting.
Yeah, I never watched X-Files, but there's a screenshot here of them just sitting in jars. They captured these 2 parasitic ice worms, and they're just little specimens there. Ugh.
Oh.
Great.
My final notes I really want to touch on. They had some really great cinematography here, or whatever, if there's a TV equivalent of that, where like at the beginning we show Paul all alone in the sick bay, and then Hugh walks up to him, and the camera pans away from a different direction. It comes back, and then it shows the chaos of what's actually going on there. I just love that moment of those 2 alone, literally and figuratively, at the same time. I thought it was really well done.
Wait, I'm sorry. Are you talking about the moment where they bring Paul out of the coma?
Yeah, early on.
Like as a way to show like Paul returning to consciousness was really beautiful.
Yeah, because there have been many times in my life where I am coming out of general anesthesia, and that is what it's like. That is very accurate.
I thought it was so well done. I love that.
However, I did have to admire Stamets for wanting to get back to work and for recognizing that was necessary, even while coming out of the coma, because when I'm coming out of general anesthesia, I just want to sleep. And I don't care what else is going on around me. Like, I'm so selfish that the most important thing to me is that everybody else just be quiet so I can go back to sleep. And here was Stamets coming out of what we saw was a very peaceful rest into the chaos of the crash landing. And instead of wanting to go back to sleep, he wants to go back to work. He is such a dedicated engineer. Even if he can be a jerk, he loves his ship and his crew.
Yeah. And I appreciated their like the sort of couple bickering about between him and Culber. I'm like, okay, well, you can get up when you can spell. Like that,
and then he does it,
but he forgets the hyphen.
And it took him like 20, but it took him 10 minutes. I loved it. I just loved every bit about it. And I just love Culber saying, "I need you well, so I can kill you."
It's true. Oh, they're a great couple. I love them.
They're so cute, and I love them, and I'm so glad because there was at the end of season 1 there was a lot of concern about like the bury your gays trope, right? And so I was extremely gratified that they brought Wilson Cruz back, and so now whenever somebody I know is like starting the show over and they're starting it for the first time and they're watching through season 1, and I always know when they get to Culber's death, and I'm like, okay, just I hear you, but wait for it. Like, just wait for it. Because these 2 really do have such a beautiful story.
Yeah. And neither Culber nor Jet Reno were in the very first few episodes. Like, they were not on the radar. Of course, Reno wasn't introduced till season 2 at all. But if you look at that dynamic at the beginning of the series compared to now, it's so different. There's so many different characters. There's so many different interactions. And that brings out so many different sides of the characters we did know in season 1. And I love that.
Yeah. Another great shot cinematically was when Commander Nan is talking to Philippa. When Saru and Tilly are gone, they're talking. I just love that they're just walking down the corridor, they get in a turbo lift, and then they walk off the turbo lift a different deck to the Linus flirting scene. But they did that with no cuts or an invisible cut, and I thought that was just really cool.
That occurred to me as well. Like when they come out of the turbo lift, I'm wondering, was there some CGI magic there, or were they like I've done theater. I know how quickly you can move sets around. And I'm wondering, when they closed those doors on the turbo lift, what did they have to move on the other side of those doors to make it look like a different deck when they reopened, because that would have been neat to see.
Yeah, it was really cool. I think that's not the first time I've done it in Discovery. Now that I'm talking about it, saying it out loud, I think they've done it before. But it's still cool. And the last thing, we've already touched on it, was just the space saloon. That was really well done, and I loved, especially the trope part where when the bad guys here, you focus on their boots underneath the saloon door first. You always do that, and they did it here too, and I thought it was just wonderful.
For some reason, as they were panning up to show his face, I was wondering if they were trying to build some dramatic tension where, like, we're gonna recognize him, like, oh my God, Harry Mudd, what are you doing here? And then I'm like, and then they show his face, and I'm wondering, wait, are we supposed to know him? Because he doesn't look familiar to me. And the answer is no. He's completely new. But, oh man, I was trying to figure it out. In fact, you know what? I probably should have gone on Memory Alpha and tried to figure out if that actor has been in some Star Trek before.
No.
No?
He's just been on Vikings and other stuff, but no. So, but he's coming back.
Well, I was just reading the Picard novel, and it's talking about the Romulan refugee movement away from the solar supernova. And it made me remember, what about that Romulan that was running the cloaking device on Deep Space Nine? And I was like, whatever happened to her? And I looked her up in Memory Alpha, and that actor later played Seska on Voyager.
Yes.
Like, you two knew that. If I ever knew it, I forgot, because I was like, oh my gosh. So she played a Cardassian, a Romulan, and a Bajoran. That's amazing.
Well, like, that era Trek loved, like, recycling actors.
Yes.
Like, we just watched, in our TNG rewatch, we just watched Time's Arrow.
Uh-huh.
And, which is, a great couple of episodes. But when Data first arrives in San Francisco, right, he has to go, like, win a bunch of money in a poker game, so he has currency. And the poker player who speaks French to him,
don't tell me. It's Gold Dukat.
Yes, but he had also previously played a different Cardassian.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, that's
interesting.
Oh, that's right.
But what you know him from, like, because the voice is very familiar to you, right? As soon as he starts talking, you're like, oh, it's Gul Dukat.
That's right, because in the DS9 novels, they brought back the Cardassian he previously played on TNG, and he's like, oh yeah, Gul Dukat, that's my brother. And that's my cousin. He's like, yeah, I know the resemblance is uncanny, but he was the jerk, I'm not. And of course, if it's not Gul Dukat, then it's probably Jeffrey Combs, because he played everybody. So cool. Anything else?
God, we're getting so long, but Kristen Byers, who wrote this, she's all over this with the programmable matter. In her version of the relaunch novels, the Borg attack Federation again. Everyone's saved by the Kaliar, and they have these catoms, basically the equivalent of programmable matter. So I think she just borrowed something from her books and put it here, which I thought was cool.
Interesting. Yeah, she's written a couple of episodes before. She wrote 2 episodes of Discovery. She wrote the Children of Mars short trek. And she wrote 2 episodes of Star Trek Picard, Remembrance and Stardust City Rag. So not only has she written novels and comic books in the Star Trek universe, but she's no stranger to Discovery as well. Although when I saw the programmable matter, I thought of 3D printing, and specifically there is a 3D printer that takes the form factor of a pen, where basically you can write on a piece of paper, but then you can also lift it off the paper and the ink comes with you. So you can basically write in 3 dimensions. It's called the 3Doodler.
Oh, wow.
It's on Kickstarter. A friend of mine who was at the cutting edge of 3D printers like 10 years ago basically called it the worst 3D printer ever. I think it has a lot of, like, it's very impressive for people who don't use the technology to see it in action, but when you actually start using it, you're like, oh, an actual 3D printer would do this so much better. But that's what I was thinking of. Like, you're basically holding a pen, drawing in 3 dimensions, and you end up with the piece that Tilly needed.
I was just thinking about this, how it was kind of this weird intersection of the replicators and the holodeck. Like, what does programmable mean for both of those technologies?
And also, like, programmable matter almost sounds like a nanite to me. Which I can see how it's being used in Discovery is not a nanite, but it's nanites are programmable and they are matter.
Uh-huh.
So. All right. Well, we are coming up on an hour, and as always, we try to keep these podcasts longer than the episode we're talking about. Tiffany, it has been such a joy talking Discovery with you. I know that you and I met back in January in your home, and before that, we met at WordCamp US, because what we forgot to mention is that, surprise, you and I are coworkers.
We are indeed.
That's right. And we don't get to work as closely as I would like, but we are always in the same Slack channel, and you're always there for me to bother anytime I want.
It's no bother. I love getting pings from you.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you.
This was super fun.
Remind us where we can find you online, Tiffany.
You can find me at my Twitter account. My Twitter handle is Tiffany. It's just my name. I've been on Twitter for a really long time.
I was just going to say, you had to be an early adopter to get that handle.
Yeah, I beat the pop singer and the jewelry store.
Did they ever try to buy it off you?
So, somebody representing himself as someone acquainted with the pop singer did try to get me to give up my handle. I declined, but no, the jewelry store has not ever approached me. Though, I would entertain an offer at this point.
So I'm not asking for numbers, but this person associated with the singer, you said they tried to get you to give up the handle. Was there?
They offered to barter a benefit concert for the charity of my choice.
Oh, how interesting!
A benefit concert in my town, so I would live in Washington D.C. for the charity of my choice. And then I was like, you know what? No,
you could just give the money.
Wow, yeah, because a concert, depending on how much they throw behind it, could be a relatively small affair in some coffee shop, or it could be a huge sold-out stadium. And
well, and that was my thing. I was like, is the 80s pop singer Tiffany that big of a draw in Washington, D.C.? At the time, I think 2015, that this would be like a worthy thing. And I was like, no, I don't think that it would be. No shade to my namesake, but no. I just decided that it probably wasn't going to be what I wanted. Well,
it looks like she landed on Twitter anyway. I see she joined in June of 2009 with the handle Tiffany Tunes. And Indeed. She has a Patreon. How about that? I did not expect that.
Hey, everybody's the residuals run out eventually.
But she has only 22 backers. That's not going to be enough to put on a charity concert.
I think she's alone now.
Ooh.
Zing. Okay. Well, Tiffany from twitter.com/Tiffany, First Officer Tiffany of an unknown transport ship. Thank you so much for your time. It's been such a joy chatting Discovery with you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much.
Until next time.
Hit it.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes and keep your hailing frequencies open by following us on Twitter @TransporterLock or subscribing to our podcast and email newsletter at transporterlock.com.